Right now, somewhere in Texas, a herd of longhorn cattle is moving slowly across an open pasture under a wide blue sky. Their horns, some stretching 5, 6, even 7 feet from tip to tip, catch the morning light like something out of a painting. And most people driving past on the highway would glance over, maybe take a photo, and keep going without ever asking the question that actually matters. How does this happen? Who takes care of these animals? How do millions of longhorns get raised every single year across America, and now across parts of Africa too? And what does it actually take to make that work? Today, we are going to answer all of that. And by the end of this video, I promise you are going to see this animal and the people behind it in a way you never have before. Let's go. The Texas Longhorn is one of the oldest and most unique cattle breeds in the entire world. It is not a breed that was designed in a lab or developed through a careful modern breeding program. It is a breed that was shaped by 500 years of surviving completely on its own. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Americas in the late 1400s and 1500s, they brought cattle with them. Over time, many of those cattle escaped or were released and began living wild across the open land of what is now Texas and the surrounding regions. For hundreds of years, with no farmers feeding them, no veterinarians treating them, no fences protecting them, these cattle survived on their own. They dealt with extreme drought, brutal summer heat, freezing winter storms, wolves, mountain lions, and every other challenge the land could throw at them. The animals that could not handle those conditions died. The ones that could handle them survived and had calves. And generation after generation of that natural selection produced something extraordinary, an animal with an almost supernatural ability to thrive in harsh conditions. Longhorns can survive on lower quality grass than almost any other cattle breed. They can go longer without water. They fight off diseases and parasites that devastate commercial breeds. And those massive horns are not just beautiful, they are a weapon that evolved over centuries of living without human protection. This is what makes the longhorn unlike anything else in American agriculture. After the Civil War ended in 1865, something remarkable happened. Millions of longhorns had been roaming wild across Texas while men were away fighting. When the war ended, those cattle were worth almost nothing in Texas, but were worth serious money in the hungry cities of the North. So, ranchers and cowboys began rounding them up and driving them north, hundreds of miles on foot, to railroad stations where they could be loaded onto trains and sold. These were the great cattle drives, and they are one of the most dramatic stories in American history. The cowboys who did this work were young. Many were teenagers. Many were black men who had recently been freed from slavery and were now building new lives on the open range. Many were Mexican vaqueros whose families had been working cattle for generations before Texas was even part of the United States. They worked in brutal conditions, exposed to every kind of weather and danger for months at a time. The most famous route was the Chisholm Trail, and at its peak, hundreds of thousands of longhorns moved along it every year. These cattle drives built the American beef industry, and the longhorn made it all possible because no other breed could have survived that journey. Today, longhorn ranching in America looks different from those trail drive days, but the heart of it is the same. Modern longhorn ranches range from small family operations with a few dozen animals to enormous commercial ranches covering hundreds of thousands of acres across Texas, Oklahoma, and the Great Plains. The most important skill a longhorn rancher has is understanding their land. Every piece of land can only support a certain number of animals without getting damaged. This is called carrying capacity. Put too many cattle on too little land, and the grass gets destroyed, the soil erodes, and the whole ranch falls apart within a few years. The best ranchers rotate their herds between different pastures on a careful schedule, letting grazed land recover before the cattle come back. They watch the grass, the rainfall, the soil. They think about their land the way a doctor thinks about a patient, always monitoring, always adjusting, always trying to keep the whole system healthy. And because longhorns can survive on tougher, drier land than commercial breeds, many ranchers can work with territory that would simply not be viable with any other animal. Water management is the other big challenge, especially in the dry southwestern states where many Longhorn ranches sit. Here again, the breed's natural toughness becomes a real advantage. Where a commercial breed might need water every single day to stay healthy, a Longhorn can go significantly longer, which means ranchers can work across much larger areas without building expensive water infrastructure everywhere. But on a big ranch, water systems are still a major operation. Windmill pumps pulling from underground wells, stock tanks collecting rainwater, sometimes miles of pipe running water across multiple pastures. Getting water right is as much an engineering problem as a farming one. And in winter, when the grass stops growing, ranchers switch to feeding hay, dried grass cut and stored in the summer months. Managing a hay supply for hundreds or thousands of animals through a cold winter is one of the most important financial decisions a rancher makes every year. Now let's take this story to Africa, because the Longhorn's journey does not stop at the American border. Over the past few decades, Longhorn genetics have been introduced to ranching operations across East and Southern Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. The reason is exactly what you would expect. Africa's ranching environment in many regions is harsh, dry, and demanding in ways that are very similar to the conditions that shaped the Longhorn in the first place. Local African cattle breeds like the Nguni and the Ankole are already tough and adapted to their environments, but ranchers in these countries recognize that introducing Longhorn genetics could bring additional benefits: stronger disease resistance, better ability to handle drought, and the kind of low-input hardiness that makes an animal profitable on difficult land. In parts of Kenya and East Africa, Longhorn bulls have been brought in specifically to improve herd resilience and cut veterinary costs. In South Africa, some wildlife conservancies have introduced Longhorns because the cattle graze alongside wild animals and need to be able to defend themselves against real predators. On a landscape where lions are not just a symbol but an actual daily reality, those 6-foot horns stop being decorative very quickly. There's also a cultural dimension that matters here. In many African communities, cattle are deeply connected to social identity, tradition, and status. The visual power of the Longhorn, that dramatic, wide horn spread, has resonated strongly in places where cattle have always been symbols of strength and pride.
But African ranchers face challenges that American ranchers simply do not deal with. Land ownership and grazing rights are far more complicated and contested across much of sub-Saharan Africa. Many traditional cattle keepers are pastoralists who move their herds across shared land following the rain and the grass rather than working within fixed, fenced boundaries. Veterinary supply networks, hay production systems, and livestock markets that American ranchers rely on every day barely exist in many rural African regions. Ranchers working with Longhorns in remote parts of Kenya or Tanzania are often solving basic infrastructure problems from scratch. And yet they are doing it because the animal's natural toughness makes it worth the extra effort. Back in America, the Longhorn's future has never actually looked brighter. The breed nearly went extinct in the early 20th century when commercial beef production shifted almost entirely to faster-growing, heavier breeds. A small group of dedicated ranchers and conservationists saved it. Today, the Texas Longhorn is registered and celebrated, valued for its genetics, its historical significance, its role in ecotourism, and increasingly for its practical advantages as climate change makes drought conditions more common and more severe across the American West. An animal that can produce value from land with less water and less feed is not a historical curiosity anymore. It is a genuinely smart answer to a genuinely serious problem. And that is what this whole story comes down to. Whether you are watching a Texas rancher move a herd across a golden afternoon pasture, or a Kenyan rancher checking his water tank with a Longhorn bull watching him quietly from a distance, you are seeing the same thing. A person, an animal, and a piece of land. A relationship built over 500 years of survival, history, and hard work. The Longhorn did not survive because someone protected it from the world. It survived because it was strong enough to handle the world on its own. And the people who raise these animals today, on both continents, carry that same quality. They are tough, patient, deeply connected to their land, and quietly doing one of the most important jobs on the planet. Next time you see a longhorn, remember that. Those horns stretching wide against the sky are not just a photo opportunity. They are 500 years of history still walking.